I'm going to talk about the agenda for this evening. We are going to be doing some introductions of who's speaking. We have some announcements, and then we're going to have our talk with Adrienne Guillory and Ashley Connor talking about what to do with all that fabulous UX research data once you've collected it all. Then we're going to have some Q&A with our speakers, and tonight we're going to have some breakout rooms for some networking opportunities. Now, if you're not feeling up to networking this evening, that's totally fine. We're going to give you plenty of time to bow out and call it a night if you don't feel comfortable, or a morning, wherever you are. If you don't feel comfortable participating in the networking, but not till the end. You don't want to bow out until there'll be plenty of warning to let you know. So we're going to have 2 sessions of 15 minutes of meeting people, hopefully around the world. So I encourage you to stay on and see who you never know who you might meet. Okay. So I just want to really briefly some people, I'm assume, are first timers here. If you are a first timer here for UX research and strategy, go down to the reactions and give us a thumbs up. Let's see if it's your first time. Great, there's some first timers here. This is awesome. So nice to see you. So the UX research and strategy is a group dedicated to teaching and exploring topics basically related to user research and strategy. And so we want to make these topics approachable and actionable. So the point of our meetups are to give you something to take back to work the next day, to implement and to get started. And so that's why we've selected such a wonderful topic today. So let me briefly tell you who is involved. Myself, I'm Jen Blatz, and I'm a user experience researcher and designer at Fidelity Investments. Lori Whitaker is research lead at GitLab. And Lauren Singer, if you want to wave Lauren, she's a design team lead at Capital One. We also have a couple of fabulous volunteers. Vincent is our volunteer chair, we have a couple of chairs. Vincent is our volunteer chair, and if you're interested in volunteering and helping out UX research and strategy, we encourage you to reach out to Vincent. And Sonia is our sponsorship chair, and if you're interested in sponsoring or supporting UX research and strategy in any way, we encourage you to reach out to Sonia as well. So let's talk about the next event. The next event is going to be as awesome as this one. Maybe, we'll see. Awesome in a different way. We're having Deb Gelman of Bottle Rocket, who's going to be speaking about the research method of a contextual inquiry and how to do that remotely now that a lot of us are working in remote situations. So tickets are now available on Eventbrite for that. We encourage you to go on there, grab your seat. They're going pretty fast. We just put them up today and they're going very quickly. So Deb is our speaker for August 18th. That is 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, so a half hour later than this meetup starting. August 18th. Grab your seat. We also want to point out that we have registered with North Texas Giving Day. And I just want to let you know that you don't have to be in North Texas to support us for North Texas Giving Day. We
Get to the point where we decided this is a big enough.
Oh, I think somebody needs to go on mute. That isn't. Just a reminder, please go on mute if you are joining us today so that we don't interrupt our speakers. So North Texas, again, you don't have to be in North Texas. This is a charitable giving event that happens in North Texas, but they accept donations from all over the world. Early giving starts on September 1st, and we're going to provide some more information on how you can help keep, maybe share a little bit of funds to help bring free quality events like this to the world. And we're going to have information about that on our website and on our social media channels. So check out those for further details. Again, for those who may have joined us late, we're on several social media channels. And just want to point out once again that our Facebook is a new and improved Facebook we had to transfer over. So please like our new Facebook page. We'll be sending out a survey We are researchers. We want to iterate and continue to improve upon our products. So we are relying on you to provide feedback to make sure that we are providing a quality product. So when that survey comes to your inbox, please fill it out and please let us know your thoughts on tonight's event. And as I mentioned before, we will be having breakout rooms for some networking opportunities. This will be after Adrienne's talk, Adrienne Ashley's talk, after they field some questions and answers. And for those who don't feel comfortable participating in breakout rooms, we will give you plenty of time to bow out gracefully. So without further ado, let's talk about our speakers tonight. So Ashley Connor is a senior user experience researcher, and she has conducted user research for Fortune 500 companies like Equifax, FedEx, Salesforce, and Kate Spade. Ashley lives in Dallas and is a UNT grad, and she loves kitty cats. Adrienne Guillory is an expert in human-centered design, design thinking strategy, facilitation, and generative user experience research. Adrienne is a co-founder of Black Dallas UX. She's a mentor and a COVID-19 teacher and mommy. Let's give a thumbs up for all the parents who are dealing with all the kiddos at home. That's a huge thumbs up. You guys are heroes. So yes, thumbs up in your screen or on the reactions. Thank you to all the parents who are keeping it afloat and keeping it sane, which is difficult task for sure. So for tonight's talk, congratulations. You've conducted hours of recordings and interviews and pictures and taken in all this data. Now what? Adrienne and Ashley are going to tell us what to do as far as data analysis. So I'm going to stop sharing, pass the baton over to our lovely ladies, and let them start telling us about user research. Adrienne, Ashley, floor is all yours.
All right, thank you guys so much for taking time to do this. Adrienne, did you want to share the screen? Perfect, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about how to analyze that qualitative user research data. So thank you guys all for taking time to stop and join and do this with us today. Just a little background on me. As she mentioned, I am a UX researcher with Usability Sciences. I've been there for almost 8 years at this point. Prior to that, worked for a public relations agency before kind of accidentally switching careers and just falling in love with research and seeing like, this is really what I wanted to do. This is where I should be. As was mentioned, I am also a cat lady. The reason I mention that again, I am doing this from home. I guarantee you my cat will make an appearance, or at least you will hear her at some point during this. All right.
All right. And I am Adrienne Guillory. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm the Director of Design Thinking for Usability Sciences. I co-founded Dallas Black UX. I've been in research coming up on 14 years, I want to say. I started at Usability Sciences many, many moons ago. I left for a period and did what I call a tour of some of the big companies in Dallas. So Sabre, AT&T, Southwest Airlines before coming back to Usability Sciences. It was like coming back home. I love it here. And then also, like I said, shout out to all the teacher parents who are trying to balance kids at home and, you know, do all this amazing work. So we'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so we have to, just because I'm so thankful to work for a company like this, give a shout out to Usability Sciences and the leadership team there. They gave us permission to use working time to put together this presentation, which we appreciate. Ashley and I have done almost no work today outside of preparing for this, so thank you. A little bit about Usability Sciences. So we are a user research firm based out of Dallas, Texas. Not sure if you hear my twang or not, but I am a Texan. At a glance, we've been in research for 31 years. So Jeff Schuler started the company long before most people even thought about user research. He came straight out of IBM. We do about or just over 100 projects per year. The company itself is 20, 25, 30 people. Of that, the majority of the team are dedicated user researchers. In addition to that, we also have our own in-house recruiting team, and our methodologies run the full spectrum. So everything from trying to understand who your users are, to ideating, brainstorming, and then the last part, of course, testing and improving. We do work globally, both quant and qual. I don't know what just happened. Did I do that? Where did that come from? Do y'all see a line?
Somebody's writing on the screen.
Yeah,
So hang on, I can fix it. I just have to remember how to
We'll
fix
clean
it.
it off.
I was like, I didn't touch anything. My hands there. We'll continue, but a little bit more. So just to give you all some context as we go through this, because we realize kind of our perspective is a little bit different. So as I mentioned, I've done this as a consultant at Usability Sciences, as well as an in-house researcher at all those other companies. But when we typically talk about this, there are a couple of things you should know. So first of all, at Usability Sciences, we always work in pairs. You have at least 2 dedicated researchers. That gives us the benefit of having one person who is the moderator and one person who takes notes, okay? Super important. We switch off, of course, but there's always 2 of us. Another thing to take into consideration, which is why I think Lori asked us to put together this presentation, is that in the grand scheme of user research, we are wicked fast, okay? So for our standard projects, whatever that means today, a standard project, that's a 5-day turnaround. So from the last day of testing or the last user, we have 5 days to turn a report back around, send it back to the client. And then the last part, just to kind of keep you in sync, because I have done both, worked as a consultant and in-house, I tend to use the words clients and stakeholders interchangeably. So if that's confusing to you, I'm so sorry, but I just want to let you know because I have a tendency to do that, okay? Now, one of the things is, so, you know, Jennifer, as she was going through, and she's super excited, like, oh, so many people are here and from all over the world. Just as she's excited right now, she's been just as excited as this thing has been happening. So much so that she and Lori are constantly sending us updates. At one point we were like, stop telling us, I don't know how to deal with that many people in my head. But you know, one of the things that's evident is that this is a really important topic. So as of yesterday, I think they had over 1,800 RSVPs for this. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out. But the reason why this is so important is because analyzing research for a lot of people is super overwhelming, right? When you think about the amount of data points that you're taking in, so whether you're talking about a few users, you know, a couple of users, thousands of users, whatever that may be, that's a lot of data to process. And, you know, a lot of times people just aren't ready for it. One of the things that is, you know, very important, and it can also be kind of off-putting when you're thinking about this, is that to do this analysis well, you really have to disconnect from yourself, right? You have to tune out your own biases. You have to tune out your own preferences. You have to tune out your own motivations outside of collecting good user research, okay? And then the last one, you know, despite what some people think, this part of the work takes extra preparation, extra focus, and a lot of practice, okay? So when I think about, you know, where I was many moons ago, it took me a while, you know, starting from no real feedback or no real background in user research to get to where I considered myself on autopilot, right? So where I could do some of these things without thinking about it. So it does take a lot of practice. You know, I find it hilarious when, you know, newbies or people who are kind of transitioning into research kind of come to us with their research needs or analysis needs. I think about, you know, some people, they go do the research and then they come back and they're like, do something with it, right? You know, and a lot of people think of it like, you know, oh, we need a moderator guide, we need a plan, we're going to run the test, and then, you know, things just happen, right? It's just all these insights fall from the sky and it's going to be perfect. We all know better, right? You know, when Ashley and I were thinking about this project, we started thinking about all of the actual pieces that go into it. So the process looks less like this, right? This is not even a real thing, to more like this, right? It's a lot of little pieces in there. So, you know, as I mentioned before, it looks like a lot. It is a lot. It's what makes us amazing, right? But like I said, you will get better. It does get easier. It does get faster. But like I always say, trust the process and you'll get there. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, analyzing the report is only is a subset of the entire research project, okay? So we won't be able to cover everything that goes into this. And that's primarily what I refer to as the foundation work. So understanding the need, right? Why are we doing this work? That should inform everything from your goals to your methodology to how we take notes, what you report on, and your write-up. Super, super important. Next is making sure that we're answering the right questions, okay? Again, that could be a whole talk just on its own. The next one is identifying the goals. You know, it's kind of disheartening sometimes when you do a project and you get to the end and nobody remembers why they were doing it, right? So then your research is just kind of all over the place. No one really knows what to do with it because no one ever defined what success looks like, okay? And then of course, as part of this kind of foundation work, you're gonna choose a research method, right? So the reason, oh, actually, before I do that, so all of those things are super important, right? I'm sure UX Research and Strategy has already done some talks on some of those things I'm aware of. Also, Usability Sciences, we posted a blog, I wrote a blog last week that goes into that in more detail. It provides some activities you can use to help kind of center and focus your research. I think Ashley's gonna drop the link to this blog in the chat for you to refer back to. And I think between these two documents, it'll be a good starting point, right? Okay, so we shared this with our internal team earlier, and their feedback was, hey, it was kind of jarring to kind of just go into this next section. It would help to know where we are. So everyone take a look at the screen. So the first 3 blocks refer to the blog. We're gonna start at step 4, okay? I'm gonna transition over to Ashley and she's gonna take it from here.
All right, so as Adrienne said, there is a lot that goes into this. And one of the most important things is gonna be the efficient note-taking. So before even beginning your research, it's really important to pick the right note-taking method. The reason it's so important to use the right tool is during that session, you want to focus on the user. You want to focus on the study and the questions you need to ask. You don't want to be sifting through your notes and rearranging, oh, where do I put this? Where do I put that? So you want to make sure you're picking the right note-taking tool. No matter what you want to pick a tool that lets you kind of analyze your data as you go. Adrienne, if we could go to the next slide for me. Perfect, thank you. So again, we wanna make sure we're picking the right tool. So we wanna make sure, what are we gonna be doing with this data? Do we want video clips? Do we want quotes? We wanna make sure we can mark findings, time on task, pass-fail rates. So that's something you're gonna need to decide before you pick the tool, what you're gonna need. And as I said, you wanna make sure it's a tool that lets you analyze it as you go. And what we mean by that is something that kind of easily allows you to review your notes and pick out the insights or trends as they're happening. And then you also want to make sure it's something you can export later, or at least easily review your notes to go through and make sure you're hitting the high points in your report. The last thing you really want to do is spend a lot of time digging through this notes in order to get a report out when you're done. All right, so we have several note-taking options. It could be a spreadsheet, an Excel doc, Word, Google Doc again, or mind mapping, or we've got all these other tools that are out there. Today, we're really just going to focus on these first 3 options. If you prefer the other tools, that's fantastic. All of those require some onboarding, just some general learnings that you would need to use before you could use them. And so we're not going to go through all of those today. But jumping in to spreadsheets. So spreadsheets are what you're going to want when you're working on a very regimented task set. So mostly with quantitative studies, benchmarking, where you're doing a bit of quant and a bit of qual. So jumping into kind of the pros here of using a spreadsheet. They're going to be great for capturing task timings, pass-fail rates, rating questions, and basically any number-based tasks that you're going to need to compare later. It also lets you easily kind of see tasks side by side for users and kind of compare how they did on them. One great bonus that I really appreciate when it comes to using Google Sheets is that I can share access with my colleague. As Adrienne mentioned, our company works in pairs. So I can share it with my colleague and we can kind of take notes alongside each other. That's fantastic when I'm trying to focus and talk to a user and I can just glance over at my notes, my spreadsheet, and see that she's in the cell taking notes, so I don't need to worry about it. And on the flip side, if she's in another cell, I know that, okay, she doesn't have time to get these notes, I can take them. So for me, that's one of the great benefits of using a Google spreadsheet. Some of the cons is that we really wouldn't recommend it for a qualitative study, or basically an open site exploration where the user's kind of going to do their own thing and not go in the direct order. So it doesn't work well for when you want to throw in some additional questions. And it can be very difficult to work through when the user tries to jump around, as I mentioned. Okay, so now thinking about Word documents and Google Docs. I'm going to be honest, this is my least favorite way to take notes. The only instance in which I've really used a Word doc is when I'm taking notes on an unmoderated study. What I mean by that is that when the users have already completed the study on their own, answering a set list of questions in order, so all I'm really doing are reviewing their videos or their notes or just their answers to the questions and jotting down my notes in the exact same order for every single users. So I think the main pros of Word is it's going to be pretty comfy for you. Everybody can open it up and start typing. And it's going to be useful, like I said, in reviewing those unmoderated studies. Where it's not going to be useful is on any type of study where there's not a very set structure. So if the user jumps around, say they start on the home page and immediately go to checkout, that's not going to be useful for me in a spreadsheet. I'm going to be scrolling around trying to just catch up with them to take notes. And that's not something you want to do. I will say I like to do my brain dumps in Word, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So moving on to my favorite, which is mind mapping. This is a fantastic free-form way to take notes. It allows you to easily switch topics and kind of just follow the user's journey without missing a beat. Where this one's going to be best for is going to be qualitative studies, studies where you really just want to let the user guide you and kind of just sit back and observe them. It lets you easily jump around. Though this one's got a lot of pros for me because, as I said, I can kind of just sit back and let the user do their thing. I can set up some main blocks like home page, home page, or say item page, and then cart, and then checkout, and then easily fill in the gaps there. Some of the cons to that are going to be, it's going to get a little unwieldy if you do not keep that structure. So if you don't keep a structure, it's going to get very large and very hard to deal with. But I will say this mind map is going to be fantastic for you to copy and paste your findings into Word if that's how you like to do your brain dump like I do. All right, getting into some of the best practices for note taking. As I mentioned, you want to keep a structure, so you're going to make a shell before you get going. Whether, say we're talking about just a general retail site, that shell, like I said, home page, item page, cart, checkout, so that you can just kind of fill in what you need there. The other thing you're going to want to make sure you do is to familiarize yourself with whatever tool you're using. Mind Map, as I mentioned, has hotkeys. I may not have. They have hotkeys that you can go in and set up. And so it's fantastic. I can just press F6. It's going to highlight my whole line and say finding. But I have to set that up ahead of time, and I have to remember which key does which. So you're going to have to familiarize yourself with whatever tool you choose to use, and also understand its limitations, as well as if it's going to export nice or not. The other thing, which is the most important thing, is that context is everything. And what I mean is, I do not want dictation notes. That's not going to be very helpful. But I do want that for quotes. So for instance, if the user says, this is confusing because, I want to capture everything after because. I want it to be in their words. There is a spectrum here. So when you're starting out, and I did this when I started out, I wrote down everything the user said, word for word as much as I could get it. As I got more comfortable, I was able to kind of shorten my notes and really just focus on the verbatim quotes and the things that I needed to catch verbatim, and less of that dictation as I was going through. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about periodic analysis. So you're taking notes every session, every day. So what you really want to do is to make sure you're on the same page with everybody, is make sure you're discussing and annotating. So between sessions, take a minute to chat with your colleague, your client, your stakeholders, and just make sure you're on the same page. Make sure that the way you've set up the study is going to be answering the goals that you came up with before. Because if it's not, you're going to need to make some changes for the next session. I also like to make sure we sit down and do at least a 30-minute daily debrief at the end of every day. And again, that is just a way to make sure we are all on the same page. This research is going the way we want it, and we want to make sure we are hitting our research goals and answering those questions. Now, if you're a lone researcher, you don't have your colleague helping you or any stakeholders watching with you, you're going to want to make sure to read your notes and watch those videos again daily to make sure you're catching the important things. What we do not recommend is waiting till the end of a 12 90-minute session project and then watching those 12 90-minute session videos back to back. That's not going to help you. That's going to be overwhelming and just very difficult to get through. All right, so the other thing you want to do, as we mentioned when we're discussing in these daily chats, you're going to need to adjust your questions and maybe even your methodology. If you're talking through this and realize, hey, we're not answering our research questions, it's time to switch gears. So make sure you're able to think this through and adjust pretty quickly if necessary. And at this point, I will pass it back over to Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm gonna turn this other monitor off, otherwise I'll be tempted to watch you all. Okay, so Ashley has walked through kind of, you know, one of the things that we think is most important, right, in doing research is your note-taking in general. I'm gonna transition us to the part that, you know, the team actually asked us to talk about, and that is analyzing data. So it's important to understand that analyzing data, right, is transforming those notes, the information, what the user, customer, stakeholder says into insights that we can actually use, okay? So there are some key steps to doing this, and we're gonna walk through each of these. So I don't want anyone to be alarmed, okay? But as we mentioned earlier, you know, I've been kind of doing this a while, and I wanted to pick out the ways or some activities that I would use to train this behavior, okay? So we're gonna leverage some things, some activities you've seen used for actually collecting research and ideation. We're gonna use some of those to teach how to analyze data, okay? Everybody ready? Okay. So for this first one, the very first step in, you know, kind of making sense of all of the chaos, right, so that you can start to identify themes and patterns is to start with clustering. Some people refer to this as affinity diagramming. You know, there's a few different names for it, affinity something, which is basically just grouping related notes, findings, information, data to start to be able to uncover those themes, see those patterns, okay? Now, some of you may be wondering why we did not present this as one of the note-taking kind of opportunities or activities. So my personal opinion, and this is just me, if you want to email me and talk about it, we can do that. But, you know, when I'm trying to do research and I'm trying to get something done quickly, kind of taking notes as a group is not necessarily effective for me. Like I said, I have the benefit of working with another experienced researcher. I have done this other ways with, you know, I'm moderating the session or I'm interviewing the client and, you know, the stakeholder, the project owner, product manager, or designers are taking notes this way, okay? I've done that, I've done it both ways, but I prefer to use Affinity clustering, diagramming as a collaboration tool, not necessarily a note-taking tool, okay? So back to this as clustering. So some steps in here. First, you're gonna start by organizing the data. So as Ashley talked to, our typical process is to come out of research and do a brain dump. It's super, super important that you don't waste too much time or allow too much time to lapse before you do this. So for instance, if Ashley and I are working on a project together, we finish Friday, we finish somewhere, you know, kind of in the afternoon, we're still gonna take an hour or two to get all the thoughts out of our minds while it's fresh, okay? The next thing is we get everything out and then using the same document start to include some of that context. So as she mentioned, context is everything. So I want to include user quotes, any story that they told us, if we captured some sort of a video clip or we had something to kind of add to that, I'm going to go ahead and include it there, right? If for no other reason, I don't want to have to go back and look for it later. So go ahead and do it while we know where everything is. I also use this opportunity, so maybe a couple of days later, you know, if we have to, or the next day, we're going to go ahead. I'm old school, y'all, so I will go ahead and print out all of my logs, right? If I'm doing some sort of a qualitative research project, or I'm gonna go ahead and sit down and sift through all the data line by line if I have to do this on my machine. But I like to double check myself. So sometimes when we're doing research, you know, we may have gone into it looking for some things and found out those aren't really problems at all, but the initial kind of problem was on my mind. Or, you know, one or two, you know, customers, participants, or whatever spent so much time complaining on this one thing, it felt like a bigger problem than it was. So double checking your notes will help you out a lot. This is why it's also important to make sure you choose a tool or a note-taking kind of a platform that lets you go in and look for those tags and look for those annotations so that I'm not literally having to look at everything, right? I can pull out the highlights because I've already done that. The next thing, super important, is we're going to take all of that data, okay? So now let's talk about this if we're doing just a qualitative research project because it's easier. We're gonna take that data and start to isolate it. So if you like sticky notes, you can sticky note. Me personally, I just like to take my brain dump and cut it up, and it looks like, you know, a whole school project in here. But the point is to get one idea per sticky note or piece of paper, okay? Everybody got that part? One idea. The next step is you're gonna start to group those learnings, okay? I'm very intentional about the word learning yet because you don't know what it is. You don't know if it's an insight, you don't know if it's finding, you don't know what it is at this point. So I'm very intentional about learnings, but we're gonna take those one by one. And we're gonna say, okay, what is this? What does it relate to? And as you go through each of these, what you'll start to see is some very obvious kind of intersections, right? This is over here, this is over here, these are kind of here, and you'll start to group it that way. The next step is to refine those groups. So I think, you know, in thinking about how we train this piece of the work and thinking about the mistakes that I've seen other researchers make, as well as myself when I got started, is we think that that first grouping is enough, and it's not, okay? That's just kind of high level. but now we need to go back and put some actual thought into it, okay? So looking at those groups, do you have some piles that are way bigger than everything else? Do you have some piles that is like, it's not even really a pile, it's just one or two thoughts? And did we think about it the right way? If it's a really big pile, should we break that down into some kind of subcategories? Is it really all the same thing? Should we be grouping some or the same idea, right? We should be kind of reworking these groups so that we can get to something that's truer to what we'll need for a report. This last one, if I'm honest, it's not my favorite part. And I'm usually hesitant to give the okay to go ahead and put the circle around it. I don't know, I'm just weird like that. Because until you get good at the categorizing and the grouping, some people put circles around it way too soon. So the purpose of the circle, right, is to fence in these ideas. We're saying these things go together, right? But until you get really good at kind of sifting, sometimes you'll have to move them around. That said, there's nothing wrong with moving them around. But you want to just be sure, right? You want to do a couple of iterations of the sifting and grouping before you say, this is it. Okay, so then the last one is label your groups. So the purpose of the label is not to be cute. The purpose of the label is to differentiate this group of data or this group of findings, learnings from this group of findings or learnings, okay? That is the purpose. It's also supposed to kind of capture the spirit or the essence of whatever that group represents. So some of the things that labels that you might use might be navigation, distrust, efficiency, findability, pain points. Those are the type of labels you might want to see there. If you go to label this and this has like 4 or 5 words, you can probably sift that group a little bit more, right? You're shooting for 1 or 2 words as your label. The last step here in this particular activity is to archive it, take a picture. If you're doing this on some sort of a tool online, you want to make sure you get a final version, export it, save it, lock it, so you can refer back to it. If you're doing this on a whiteboard or butcher paper, then you want to take a picture, okay? Now, you're going to hear me say that several times over through the rest of this presentation. This is why. So capturing kind of the result of these activities is super important. One, it's your record of what happened, right? So if we're using sticky notes or random pieces of paper, we're going to move those things around. And it never fails. Somebody comes back, 20, 30 minutes in, they're like, wait, what was this before? And if you don't have a picture, you won't know. The next thing that I learned when I went to some of these other companies is these pictures are great for storytelling, okay? So if you think about kind of the image that people have of designers, researchers, UXers, the cool work is when we're in t-shirt and jeans on a whiteboard and we have sticky notes, right? That's what they kind of look forward to. So it makes really good kind of collateral for your reports. And then the last thing I would suggest is just, because you have them, and like I said, they add kind of to the story, you can use them as background images, or when you're doing some sort of a summary at the end of the year about the work that you did, you have pictures of them. I'll give you bonus points if you have people in the pictures. Okay. So, when we get into this, again, thinking about, the parts of this that are the most difficult to train, we wanted to make sure that we stopped and thought about, or at least level set on the difference between a finding versus an insight, okay? So your finding is your statement of fact, okay? This is what happened in the research. So your person, they do this, 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 and this. That is their step. Or if you're doing a usability study, the participant went here, they did this, and then they did that. That kind of recap is a finding, okay? The insight is when you start to pull different pieces of information. So these users did this thing because of this behavior or this mindset, okay? You see how it's different? When you craft an insight well, the very logical step or the next step should be, okay, then what do we do about it, right? The whole point of what we do is to get to, okay, what do we do about it? So I was trying to look for a really good illustration of this. So I borrowed kind of this image from UX Boundary, and I just color coded it. So if you want this one, just feel free to take it, reuse it. Thank you, UX Boundary, for that. So if we look at the highlighted part, so your theme is going to be those categories that we created, right? The ones that you circled and labeled. That's your theme. Your finding is going to be any of those statements of fact within that theme. And then your insight is, what did we learn from that, right? Again, speaking to the behaviors, the motivation, what's happening in their head, the reason why that is. So for this next part, we're going to get to a step that's pretty important. I remember, when we got started many, many moons ago, we had conversations about analyzing, but we never really talked about synthesizing, okay? When I got started, I was usually impressed and patting myself on the back when I got to a report that was like 100 slides. That's great, right? But then I would send it to proofing and they're like, okay, but why? Why does any of this matter, okay? I was okay at recommendations, but I wasn't really good at why. So this is one of the ways that I use to learn how to speak to a why. Okay, so going back to your groups, we're back in your categories, right? From the Affinity clustering. And then we're gonna pull one of those categories over. Let's say navigation. So from here, I'm gonna go into my group and I'm gonna say, let's pull out this finding. And I'm gonna think about that finding. So if you are doing this as an activity and you're kind of this visual person, let's assume you're on a whiteboard or a butcher paper, you're gonna put that statement, that finding, that fact right there in the middle, okay? So this is the thing that we need to understand. So why laddering, if you're familiar, is using the question of why to drill deeper into something. Yes, I am aware that we typically use this as a research tactic, but it also helps when we're trying to think through and piece things together so we can get an insight, okay? So as you go up and you ask the question why, you have why, and then you can write the answers to that why on a sticky note, right? So let's just say we're gonna put that over here on the left-hand side, okay? You're gonna go up the ladder and you're gonna ask why. Why does this happen? Why do we care? Why is this happening this way, okay? All right, the next one is we're gonna go back down the ladder and we're gonna ask how. So if you have on the left your sticky notes of why these things happen, okay? Then your how is going to directly resolve those things. So if I'm going to use this example, it's super, super small, so I have to get close, okay? But in the example here on the left, so, the problem here, or the question here, finding here is we don't have enough capacity, okay? One of the whys here at the very top of that ladder is because we don't have creative time to set aside to work together, right? So then this on the right-hand side is going to directly relate to that. So if, the people participating don't feel that they have creative time, then one of the solutions could be to set aside that creative time to then share ideas, okay? So we've gotten to what I like to call basically, and I call it that because of this. So you know how if you have kids, and I have a 10-year-old, and when he was younger, that was his favorite word. Why? But why, mommy? But why? And he keeps asking why until I get to where I'm like, basically it's just this, right? And that basically is where I need us to be so that we know we have thought through this in every direction we possibly can. This is all I have left, because that's where the root is, okay? All right, so again, researchers, this is our passion. So all of those steps sounded long because I was talking about it, but we're gonna do it do those, practice, and then repeat the whole thing. And you're literally gonna go through each of the findings and repeat that process, okay? And then of course, we're gonna take pictures, okay? Everybody remembers why we take pictures? Okay. One of the other things that you can do at this point is, me personally, I like to take those kind of ideas, you know, my why questions, my how, or my why answers and my how answers, and put them into a spreadsheet, because at this point, I'm gonna start tracking it and start putting together my report. Some people rather just keep it separate and do everything on sticky notes and paper until they're ready to write the report. That's really up to you and what you're comfortable with. You know, one of the things that we think about and have to remember as researchers is that, you know, everything that we collect, all of the data we collect, is not going into the report. It should not go into the report, right? You know, again, like I said, you know, I thought I was doing big things when I wrote a report and it had 100 and something slides. And that was all well and good until I saw what happened to my report, right? We did the presentation. I may have gotten through half of those before, you know, a stakeholder or a manager or a product owner was like, okay, great, so what are we gonna do about it, right? Or even worse, you're looking at what happened to the report and most people don't get through the first 5 slides. It's not a bad thing, it's just realizing that people are busy. So if we know people are busy and we know they're coming to us for a specific reason, we need to make sure that we're answering those questions. So in this next activity, we're gonna talk about how to do that. Okay, so this probably looks familiar to some folks, okay? We're gonna do this bullseye diagram, okay? And I like this one because it gives you a visual way to think in your mind. Is this mission critical? Is this nice to have? Or is this something that I accidentally learned that I may not be able to use right now, but it's probably a good starting point or a seed for future research? So when we first got started with this presentation, we talked about, you know, having that good foundation, laying the groundwork for research. One of those very key elements is setting your goals and defining what success looks like, okay? So if you were doing, you know, walking through this presentation, doing this work, what I would tell you to do is find those goals, put them out. They need to be front and center. So you can write them on the diagram, you can have them across your computer, they can be a poster on the wall for all I care, but we need to be laser focused on why we're doing this work. So you can use kind of this template. You draw a bullseye, okay? And then you're gonna start to plot them. So again, everything that you said was critical. We have to know this is a goal of research. Anything related to that goes in the very middle, okay? Anything that was, you know, that's kind of nice to know, but it's not necessarily actionable right now, or doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of impact on what we're doing right now, goes in the middle. And then things that you just learned by accident, right? Completely by accident, like, oh, that is, you know, that's an interesting conversation starter, but not important for this research, that goes on that outside, and that's your miscellaneous, okay? When you're thinking about kind of what you're gonna do with this, so if you're keeping up, you realize you at this point almost have the bulk of your report done, okay? So you have pulled out your categories. Those are probably gonna be your sections for your report. You have pulled out your insights. Those are gonna be your findings, and you come up with your how. That's gonna round out your recommendations. So by this point, you're almost done, okay? So things to remember for your report is your critical insights. Those are gonna be top priority, right? If there's nothing else in that report, those insights, they're from the middle, absolutely have to be there, okay? If you're doing like a full report, right, and you kind of have a little bit more space, it's something that will probably live for a while, be kind of circulated to different teams, then go ahead and collect that secondary research as well. And then the last one, that miscellaneous, I wouldn't even necessarily include it. I would think about who Is it a stakeholder? Is it a certain organization? Is this something that will give me the opportunity to reach out to somebody and have a conversation, which is why I refer to those as conversation starters, okay? Those might be seeds for future research, which we're always looking for. To wrap this up, again, I told you I like using activities that we're kind of familiar with to teach some of these things that take a little bit more work. So that's kind of what that is. So the next piece, of course, was out of scope for us. But the next part, of course, is going to be transitioning to this report. We won't go into all of that because, again, I know UX Research and Strategy has done a talk on this before. But some things that I want you to keep in mind is how to get there. So from that report, you're ready to write the report. I want you to pull the insights from your why laddering activity and start to put those into some sort of consolidated document. You can put it in a document, you can put it into a presentation template, whatever works for you. As Ashley mentioned, we typically like to write ours in Word because then we can do all the wordsmithing and all that other stuff in a relatively easy fashion. And then the next part, again, researchers, I love us because we like to talk and we can use many, many words to say something very, very simple, but brevity is a skill, okay? If when you are writing, it's like, I don't really know what part of this is important, refer back to that diagram that we just talked about and use the same assessment. Is this critical or is this just nice, right? Let's get to where those words or the language, the reports are super, super succinct so that your stakeholders can follow along and they care about the important things and then work on socializing the other things. Whew. Okay, so that is the end.
Awesome.
I have just a couple more. So if you have questions for us, you are more than welcome to reach out to Ashley or myself. I'm also going to drop it's over here. I'm gonna drop the link to subscribe to our blog. So as we put information or content out, I think we publish monthly. Feel free to subscribe and you'll get that data from us as well. All right, Jennifer, back to you.
All right, thank you very much. I think everybody needs to go down to the reactions and give a nice bit of applause for these two. They were great. Thank you very much. We're taking questions in the chat now. So throw them in there. First question for Ashley and Adrienne. So this is from Trevor. Should you actually go over the labels with the stakeholders before you conduct your interviews to make sure you're focusing on results that they want to see, or just let the participants' response dictate those labels?
So your labels happen after you do the research. So that's not necessarily something that you run by your client. When you're talking to your client before the research, is just making sure we're in line with what you're trying to accomplish. I think it's a good idea during the analysis phase, even if it's just for show, right? To include your stakeholders and kind of talk them through how you got there. But choosing those labels absolutely comes from the research. Okay,
Next question. Again, if you have questions, we're taking them in the chat. So make sure you drop them into the chat. Okay, so let's say you're a group that's worked together for a bit of a time. Have you developed some reusable set of tags or finding categories that you use across studies?
We probably could, but I don't know that we've ever thought about it that way. So, you know, we're consultants, right? So we have a lot of clients and I don't know that we've thought to or had a need to streamline it that way. I mean, if we sat down, we could probably come up with some easy things, but you know, we customize our research to our clients, so we have not had a need to do that.
Okay, great. Next question. So do you have some examples of what a good report contains or how you present those insights?
So I want to make sure I heard you. Do we have examples of what's in a good report? So that varies depending on who your audience is, but some key things that we like to do, okay? So if I'm understanding the question, it's components, right? What goes in it. So me, I'm a stickler for that executive summary, right? I've been in way too many calls where, you know, whoever the power that be is, they get through 3 slides and they're done. Like literally walk out the door, they're done, okay? If for no other reason, they gave us 15 minutes. So the executive summary is important, your top priority findings, whatever those mission critical things are, your findings and recommendations. And then of course, there's no point in doing user research if you don't include quotes and videos and context. Really, there was no point in you doing it if you don't include those things. Everything else, it just kind of depends on the type of research that we're doing.
Okay. Ashley, do you have anything you want to follow up?
I mean, Adrienne kind of nailed it. Put that critical stuff up front so that the way I've always kind of viewed it is if you can view the executive summary and get a snapshot of the project and you're busy, you don't need to look at the detailed findings. You should, but that executive summary should give you enough.
Okay, great. So do you do the bullseye diagramming with the sponsor when you're collecting their goals at the beginning? So in other words, do you let them help you give you the priorities?
So for me, and I'll let Ashley jump in if she wants to. So in that blog that we shared, I do a different type of prioritization with my stakeholders. So for stakeholders and clients, I like that prioritization grid, right? What's important, what's not important, what's in scope, what's not in scope. And there's an example there. But I do the why laddering with stakeholders and clients because a lot of times I find that they don't necessarily know what they want, right? It's either a reaction to something else or they found some money and they want to do some research. So I do absolutely make them though go through the process of understanding why they want to do something or articulating why they want to do something and then prioritizing the needs.
Okay, great. So do you have any recommendations on what to do when you're collecting sensitive data?
I think well, Ashley, do you have a response or you want to respond to that one before I know I'm a talker.
When you say sensitive data, do you mean like during the session, the user's putting in data and I want to block that out? Or do you mean like in the report sensitive data? Because we do work with pharma clients and some of that can kind of get sensitive. As far as during the session, I will stop sharing the screen or I will stop the recording when they're giving me the sensitive information and then restart it. For the report, you just try to frame it in a way that doesn't overshadow, or I'm sorry, you try to frame the sensitive information in a way that's not, oh, Adrienne, help me out. What's the word I'm looking for here?
Obvious.
Well, I
There.
one example. So when my very first user research project, very, very, very first one was for a contraceptive, okay? So these are 18 to 24-year-old girls talking about how they prevent themselves from getting pregnant, right? Super sensitive, right? But when you're doing the research, there's kind of this wall. There's really no need to share sensitive information. By the time they get to us, at least into the, where we're doing the testing, we don't have last names. We don't have any type of contact information. We don't have any of those details that someone else could use to identify that person. So we don't typically have that issue because, like I said, we have a recruiting arm of our business who kind of redacts a lot of that stuff before we even get to it.
Okay. So this question's from Caitlin. Do designers or researchers typically translate this into designs in your experience, or is it more of a collaboration?
I've worked on a lot of teams, so I've seen both. In an ideal world, like if I can say, what is my favorite way to get this done? I love having all the different perspectives at the table, right? But of course, that's not fair because I'm the director of design thinking. Of course, I believe in collaboration. I've also worked on teams where I, as the designer, as the researcher, do the work, the designers take it and they go and do what they wish or want to. I think that's more of an organization and a team question, not necessarily kind of a UX practice.
Okay. So do you do mind mapping or note taking after each person you have an interview with and then add that to the top of each one, or you make separate ones for each user?
It is one giant mind map and you add each user to it.
Okay.
So that's where I was saying to keep them organized, it makes sense to have homepage and then user 1, user 2, user 3 under homepage.
Okay. So is there a minimum number of findings your clients expect before they feel like you've delivered value? No.
If there is, we don't know, because of course, we do fairly extensive work. We have different types of deliverables. So we have our kind of standard report, whatever that is, but we also do some agile type reports where we're testing a small thing and they're looking for feedback the next 24 hours. So of course, the amount of findings and recommendations that goes into something like that is significantly less than a standard, but that's not kind of how we think about it. Well, we're not paying for it unless we got 400 findings. That's not a thing for us.
Okay. So how specific are the goals and how are they being set? So the follow-up question to that, what if the users talk about something else that might seem to be more urgent, but maybe wasn't one of those original goals? So how are the goals set?
So often before we get started on the project, because we're a consulting company, our clients generally come to us and say, we think we have X problem. So the goals are kind of set by the client and also us. So we'll kind of they'll talk us through what they're thinking. And the goals can be something broad as gather user feedback on the look and feel. And to the next question of what if the users start talking about something that's not part of the goal, we absolutely follow that because we want to hear also what else is going on. So you wouldn't stop somebody just because they're not talking about something that was a research goal, because maybe there's another issue we don't even know about or the client doesn't even know is a thing on their site. So that's one of the best parts for me about qual research is we end up finding out so much more than we initially wanted to or needed to.
I too love that part. So, I get excited when we go into any type of a research project and we uncover something that nobody expected. But so when we were thinking about kind of this periodic analysis, that's why that step is so important. So, we may have a client who comes in. I remember I was doing a project before where it was the client, or actually I was internal. I was at AT&T at the time. One of the teams built this huge system, like really, really big system. And they came to us because they thought they had one problem. But then when we're out in the field and we're watching people use this system and they're telling us how they train to it and how they ask questions, we find out their problem is nowhere near what they thought it was. It's a whole massive thing over here. And when you give yourself kind of room to shift and move and adapt with the research, you're in a much better position. But that happens more often than you think. But the other question that you asked as far as goals, right? So like Ashley said, a lot of times people come to us because they think they know what they want. I've been in this space a long time. I'm kind of annoying this way, but I poke holes in people's thought processes. Again, I am all about, tell me how you got here. Why is it? What evidence do you have? That's my favorite question. What evidence do you have that this is even a thing, right? And make them kind of think through that. A lot of times, and I'll say this is the trainer, mentor in me. I feel like a lot of times researchers don't necessarily want to push back because they assume that their product owner or this other person knows more than they do. And that's fine, they can, but you should be an expert at research. And you should know when you hear something that doesn't quite sound right, or be in a position to feel comfortable enough to say, hey, can you just explain this to me so I understand it better?
Okay, great answer. So next question here. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Let's see. You talked a little bit about pairing up, and somebody was curious, like, how is that working for you? You do peer reviews and gut checks. They want a little bit more understanding about how that goes.
Sure. So, sorry. So the way we're kind of set up at Usability Sciences is we'll put 2 analysts on every project. We say there's a lead and a support, but we really kind of share that role. This is kind of it is also a gut check. Make sure we're understanding the client needs. Make sure when we're taking notes, like I said, I can see if my user or my colleague is taking notes and making sure we're gathering all the data. And then as far as the report goes, I saw some people when we were doing the study go, oh my gosh, how do you guys do this in 5 days? Part of it is having that support that helps us to go through everything. So yes, they're the gut check, they're the partner, they're the helper, they're everything to help me not lose my mind on these very short turnaround projects.
I'll add they're also the trainers, right? So Usability Sciences has a knack for hiring people who have that innate ability to ask questions, connect with the client, speak for the user. Like they just kind of hire for that natural ability. One of the things that I've always appreciated about my training at Usability Sciences is that I've always worked with people who knew more than I did, okay? We are an interesting culture. We are a team of researchers who, you know, kind of get excited about telling people that their baby is ugly, right? That is our skill.
Doing that.
And we do that to each other. So, you know, one of the things that we laugh about, or my CEO, he told me, Adrienne, stop sending it to everybody unless you want to hear from everybody, because we have no problem. Could you imagine this kind of energy in a critique? Like, that's what we do. But I like to think of it as sifting. We're going to make each other better because no one wants to be kind of lagging behind. Nobody wants to be the weak link.
Okay, great. Just a couple more questions here. So this is a good one. I love this question. What are your strategies for addressing clients or stakeholders who disagree with your insights?
I'll let Adrienne take that one first.
Okay, so here's a couple of things. As a researcher, please understand when we do our work, yes, we come from a science background and, you know, we are trained to look and see certain things. But all that aside, we should be like experts in empathy, okay? We have to understand that these product owners, these designers, these developers have an emotional connection to whatever they've done, right? They've spent hours thinking about it. Y'all, they have shown this thing to their wife or their boyfriend and their girlfriend. They have, slept, ate, drank this thing. So any kind of feedback I give them is going to hurt their feelings, okay? So my knowing that, I've learned to I call it a critique sandwich, okay? Again, this is what I learned from being the mom of a little boy. I can't just say, don't do that. I have to plant the seed and make him feel like he came up with it on his own. So you start with, you did so good at this. This was a great idea. I love where it was going. This is awesome, right? However, it missed the mark a little bit. And here's what we probably need to do with it. But I'm sure you're going to kill it when you fix it. Mm-hmm. Okay? Critique sandwich. But like I said, you know, when we as researchers have to think about, we're probably the most adaptable in the room. So use that skill set. Understand who your audience is. Know what makes them tick. Know what they're sensitive about. Okay? So if I know you're super, super sensitive about that logo, I may not touch that with you. I may not do that. I'm just going to show you video after video after video of somebody saying they don't get it, they don't understand it, they didn't see it, I will absolutely kill people with content and proof before I stand there and try to fight or argue with anybody about research. I will not do it.
The proof is in the
Critique
pudding, right?
Critique sandwich, trust the process, and content, videos, quotes. I especially like the quotes where people cuss, right? Especially those. I'll even put the whole cuss word in the report. Like, hey, listen, that's not my fault. That's what they said.
Mm-hmm. I like to remind them that this isn't me critiquing you. I am the voice of the user. I am relaying this information to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one more question. Somebody mentioned something about, interviewing users. Do you have any tips on, say you have somebody new on their team, on your team, and they're like, I don't really know how to interview users. What are some good best practices and tips for people to interview users, build a rapport, whatever you feel like could be the strength of a user interview?
I'm going to say one is practice, practice, practice. Try interviewing your friends, try interviewing your colleagues, do some trial runs, some pilot sessions. Just remember it's a conversation, and that user is just as nervous as you because they don't know what you're about to do with them. They may not be familiar with this. It is a conversation. Keep it conversational. That said, silence is also your best friend. People like to fill silence. Ask open-ended questions and just let the user go. It's good to just be like, okay, that's great. Tell me more. Tell me more. Get that user talking and you'll start feeling better because you're going to be talking so much less.
So I'm going to add real quick, I'm laughing at Brian, who was like, start with the dad joke. I love that. That cracks me up. You know what? So prior to being in research, I worked in hospitality, specifically restaurant management. So I had new people come in, and this thing is a lot like that to me. Nobody wanted to carry the tray, right? Everybody's terrified that if they carry this tray, they're going to drop it, right? So I kind of believe in this whole push them in the water and see what happens. So the first thing that I do to people when training is, one, I make them be a user. Sit in that chair and let somebody else moderate to you, right? So I make them go through that experience. The next thing is, especially at Usability Sciences and everywhere else I've trained, new people sit in and watch sessions many, 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 many times before they are put in the driver's seat, okay? But at some point, when you start to see that they're getting it, I love it when people start to ask the question before you start to ask the question. I'm like, okay, you're ready. Pass them the mic. Go, right? And you don't really get the opportunity to say, no, I'm scared, right? You have all the practice in the world. You've seen this from multiple angles. For some of the people who are a little bit more shy, like Ashley said, we will have them practice, kind of run fake sessions, pilot sessions. I like to make people watch the recording of themselves, because then they'll start to see, when I say you're leading, when they watch themselves, they'll see it, right? And they'll become more sensitive to some of the things that are kind of difficult to learn when you're moderating. But all of those things work well.
Okay, great. Either one of you have anything else that we didn't touch upon today that you'd like to share before we go into our networking session? I wouldn't be a researcher if I didn't ask that question.
That's my favorite question too. Like,
I
so
always did too.
what did I not say that I should have? No, I don't, nothing else is coming to mind. I see there are a lot of questions in the chats about portfolios and whatnot. Feel free to reach out to me and talk about those things. I know UX Research and Strategy has some really, really great resources for that. But if you have specific questions for either of us, please feel free to reach out.
Ashley?
Same. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any additional questions we didn't answer. We're happy to chat about anything.
Oh, and I'll add, wash your hands and wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Yes, Adrienne's right. We do have a video that covers research, portfolios specifically on Vimeo, we'll include that link in the chat so that you can have easy access to see. We see a lot about UX research design portfolios, but not a lot about research. So we have a webinar that specifically focuses on that topic. So let's give Adrienne and Ashley another round of applause or reaction of hands for such a great presentation and Q&A session. That's really great. Thank you so much. And of the hand up. And so we're going to talk about what we're going to discuss in our breakout rooms. Again, if you're not feeling comfortable joining the breakout rooms this session, that's totally fine. We're going to give you a few minutes to bow out, but we would love to have as many of you as possible. It's a lot of great folks here, and it's difficult to network these days in this day and age with so many activities being remote. So we wanted to try out an opportunity to network. So let's give a minute or so to those who are, not feeling the socialization tonight. And in the meantime, I'm going to bring up the topic for our breakout rooms as soon as I can find the share button. All right, thank you for those who are staying. I'm excited to meet some new people. Okay, can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to give you some instructions. We're going to break out into some rooms, 2 different rooms. Each session is going to be 15 minutes. So we're going to break out into a room. And in each room, you're going to say what your name is and what your specialty is. Are you a design, research, strategy, or other? And then we're going to do the first topic, which is your favorite research method and why. Let's be sharing and make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk. So, somebody shouldn't take up the whole 15 minutes. Let's share. And we're going to have everyone talk about that in the room. If something else comes up you want to talk about before the time runs out, that's great. We'll all be in there for 15 minutes. We'll come back and then we'll break out into another breakout room for another 15 minutes answering the second point, most annoying, frustrating user experience and how you would fix it. And I know everybody's got one of those on their life. So think about that one and try to narrow it down to one. So let's, I'm going to do the breakout rooms here. And again, we're going to go into a breakout room number 1, come back, go into breakout room number 2, come back. And if anybody has anything interesting they want to share or any announcements after the second breakout room, we're going to have a few minutes of all of us together again. Okay? So let's go into our breakout rooms here. I think it's happening. Forgive me, it's not really showing me this. I'm not having any options. Maybe I need, sorry, this is my first breakout room session and it's being a little funky. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, here we go. Let's do, oh, it's going to ask me to do math. Okay, here we go. Hi. I think I prematurely, can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think I kind of prematurely brought everyone back. Sorry, I was like, "Er, you're coming back now." How was that timing? Too long? Just about right? Need more time? What did you think? Speak out and we'll do the next session. We'll adjust accordingly. I think some people are starting to come back. Let's see. Let's do a little like mini test here. We're starting to bring some people back. If you feel like the timing was too long, do the hand clap. If it was timing was too long, do the hand clap for the reaction. We could go down. If it's too long, we go down to 10 minutes. Or if you feel like it was about the right time, do a thumbs up and we'll keep it at that. So, okay.
A reaction.
Yep, let's do reactions. Thumbs up if you think 15 minutes is good, or hand clap if you feel like from the reactions, so I can see hand clap if you feel like it was too long. So it looks like most people felt like 15 minutes was a pretty good amount. Okay, great. So we're going to break out again to our breakout rooms, and this one is state your name and what your specialty is. Again, do you do design, research, or strategy? And what's your most annoying or frustrating user experience that you've come across, and how would you fix it? And I'm sure everybody's got something like that. So let's see. Recreate. How many people we got? Okay. Let's do more rooms than that. Okay, let's do that. Ready? See you in a bit.
Bye. I'm heading.
Bye. Good to see
Bye.
you, Andrew. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming.
Yeah, I'm getting called for dinner.
All right. Eat something for me. I'm hungry.
Oh, okay. Hey, Jesse.
All right.
She's
See you
in the
later.
back.
Have a good night.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jennifer.
No
It's been
problem.
cool. Yeah, yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye. Looks like people are coming back. Good to see people back. Thanks for staying and meeting new folks. You guys can hear me, right? I'm not just talking to myself. Good. I never can tell. That's awesome. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share, or anything fun that they said or heard in their breakout rooms they want to bring back here? No one heard anything fun? Come on.
It was, in general, it was nice to kind of hear some of these experiences that we've had with research not being, maybe kind of being pushed aside, not really the importance of research not being respected. And so that was nice to hear that some other designers are experiencing that as well.
Yes, it's frustrating, but yes, we're not alone in that battle, right? Yeah, I hear you.
I
Anyone
really
else?
enjoyed everyone's just the different backgrounds and organizational backgrounds in general, and it's been really interesting. So very cool.
Okay, so anyone else?
Yeah, I was wondering when this whole differentiation of roles started many years ago, you know, because when I started, it was single squad football. You had to do everything. And I was wondering how that would change the effectiveness and techniques and all that sort of thing. And it's interesting that in the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, it seems as though companies are starting now to look for, well, can you do everything again? For some of the reasons that people expressed in terms of the downside of only being a researcher, only a designer, et cetera.
I think it has something to do with the fact that it's so hard to prove ROI of research, that they start looking at their budget lines and start looking around going, well, research, what have you done for us lately? Designers, we can see what you do. Coders, we know what you do. But research, what have you done? And I feel like that's why it's swinging back to the generalist and a unicorn that never gets to sleep, who has to code and design and test what they do, because they're desperate for that ROI that it's elusive sometimes for research teams to provide.
Yeah. I mean, I've lost track of the amount of times I've seen like job descriptions that you read it and it's like, that's like 4 jobs you're asking for. You're asking for 4 people in one person. It's like, you need to have 5 years experience in everything. And like, what? Like, what are you asking for right now? You don't even know what you're asking for. You're just throwing everything at the wall and hoping something can stick. It's one of them strange ideas.
Yes,
I've lost track of
you need 5 years of remote COVID-19 research experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw a job recently that asked for 10 years experience with a software that didn't even exist 10 years ago. I was like,
you know what? I saw that too.
What is it? I saw one was like, you need to have 10 years experience in coding in this. It's like, it's been around 4 years. What are you talking about?
There was a post where the guy who had invented whatever it was, he pointed out a post where they're asking for 5 years. And he made a comment like, I just invented that like 3 years ago.
I made it.
Yeah,
I made it and I don't have that experience.
Yeah.
I saw that on Twitter too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had a really interesting conversation with a couple of people about like government open data problems and how unusable and ineffective they are with Abby. A guy called Abby, a really, really interesting discussion around that. Somebody else talked about FedEx and chatbots and how chatbots, AI-powered chatbots, are somewhere between terrible and awful most of the time.
Yeah, I think getting leaders and organizations that actually know what UX is and really building that UX culture and maturity is key. And if anything, just really reminding people or educating people on like design thinking and human-centered design methodologies, and just how flexible it is and scalable, and taking and pushing back. You got to definitely push back.
Definitely. Yeah, the discussions around like return on investment is one of them. I definitely understand why people think that, yeah, well, what did you even do? It's like, well, I synthesized ideas. I thought for you and found out information and had interesting, long-winded, very time-consuming discussions. But it looks like I've done nothing because
we don't do miracles.
I didn't make it pretty. I didn't make it pretty for you.
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an interesting world we live in.
I do have one request. If you haven't already, and if you are interested in doing so, please throw in your LinkedIn link into the chat. We're going to be sharing the chat on our website, and sometimes it's difficult to catch people's names, and oh, there was somebody in that breakout room and I forget what their name is. So if you're interested and you want to put your LinkedIn in our chat, then it'll be shared publicly. If not, that's totally cool too. Absolutely up to you. But just wanted to throw that out there to give some time to be like, oh, let me get online and find out what my LinkedIn link is and that sort of thing. Anything else kind of cool come out of the chats? How about favorite research method? Anybody? Oh, sorry, Antonia. Antonina. Sorry, Antonina.
It's actually Antoinette, but that's like
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So no, I was going to say that the breakout rooms were a little bit shorter because I think what happened was that we just managed to introduce ourselves, and then when we now wanted to like get talking,
okay,
it was already over.
Okay. A little bit longer on the breakout rooms. Let's do a little vote again that I can see people. If you feel it was good time and should not be longer, do a thumbs up. If you feel like they should be longer than the 15 minutes, which I don't know, give or take. If they should be longer claps. If they're good time, that time was good, do a thumbs up. So we're kind of getting some split, a little bit of both.
I'm probably a pretty biased person. I can talk for hours on end. So I could fill all the time, no matter how much of it there would be.
And I'm sure some introverts are like, great, I'm glad this guy's in the room so he could do all the talking.
We had 2 people in the first room, and then it went into 3, and then the second room it was 4 people, so it was a little bit harder to divvy up.
Okay, so maybe a small.
Yeah, that's what I found. Same thing. The first one was 3, and then we went to about 6 people, and that made the difference. How long we needed. Okay,
that's good to know. Yeah, it kind of asked me to do math on the spot. Like, you have this many people, how many rooms? And I was like, oh no, you didn't ask me that.
So
wait, what?
Don't make me do a quick math.
Oh, that's bad design.
Yeah, user experience problem.
It's a user experience. They should just be able to go, how many rooms do you want? And it'll work it out for you.
There's got to be a job there somewhere.
Well, the second time I did notice they had some recommendations. The first time I didn't see that. The second time I'm like, okay, now you're telling me how many will fall into each room. But the first time I didn't notice that.
With 3 people, I think 15 minutes was perfect. So maybe 5 minutes per person.
Okay.
If that helps.
Great, that's good to know.
All right. My breakout sessions had 3 people in them, but the curious thing was that the same person was in both of them. And then, so that was kind of funny when we entered the second break room and we're like, oh wow, look. So I already knew one of the people, but we had a third person who neither of us had known.
That's so you have a stalker already. That's interesting.
Not a stalker. This is cosmic. Okay, just
it's meant to be.
Got to take the right attitude.
Cosmic. It's cosmic.
Anybody have any announcements? Is anybody hiring? I know we're kind of all over the place, but is anybody's company hiring, or you know of any?
USA is always hiring. So
say again, Raquel.
USA is always. I don't know. I thought I was on mute, but I'm not. But yeah. So.
Are you in Austin or are you in Plano?
I'm in Austin.
Okay.
But we're at this point, I think, very flexible.
Fair.
Yeah.
And
Do you
you
have a
write
link to share, Raquel, in the chat maybe for anybody?
I put in my LinkedIn, but I don't,
Okay.
USA.com careers. I don't have any like specific, the way that it's broken up, the structure, it's a huge organization. So it's, it would be kind of difficult to put them all in there.
That's fair.
I was
ready.
like USA.com. I'm like,
not available either. Sorry.
I was basically going to ask them, what
USAA.
is, I was going to
It's
say,
an
what is
insurance.
USA.com? I'm like, that's like a
USAA.com.
country.
You do have to be in the States, unfortunately. So there's that catch.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking for remote work a little bit here and there, and because I work in special needs and education currently.
Oh, cool.
Why are they always hiring? Just out of curiosity.
It's a big company.
It's a huge military bank, and it's really up there, and it's a really great place to work. The HCD methodologies it's a very prominent, and it's still a work in progress. Progress over perfection, but it is a very great place where ideas are always valued in creativity.
Are they based in San Antonio?
That's where the home base is, yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is it possible? Sorry, I'm taking you away from the whole story, but I was going to ask that question in the breakout session before, it was cut short. I was thinking, is there like any way you can measure how well your questions, how open-ended your questions are? Because I find that every time you think you've asked some really pretty good open-ended questions, and then you like look at the questions and the answers that they gave, you start wondering whether you actually did it right. I don't know if anybody has that same kind of experience.
That's a great question. When we're doing a qualitative type of research, one of the things that we do is it's always a draft, make a draft of like the questions you want to ask, as you create your research plan. That's one of the items that you absolutely need to, address. And so then what we do is we actually have a team that will essentially review them and give us feedback, or just have like, okay, this is not even an edit. This is a revise, go back to the drawing board. But so we're lucky to have design researchers, but I also have books I would recommend. I know that I was in one of the rooms with one of the girls that actually hosts this, and I think she did clinical research before, and I think that she probably has some really great ideas. But I just read a lot of books and try different things, and hopefully they connect. And of course, the more that you know your audience, the more that you'll be able to just tailor those questions in a way that are going to connect with them.
There's a really good book out by Steve Portugal on interviewing users, and it goes through a lot of the subtleties of good questions and good question planning and such. So I'd highly recommend that as a resource.
What's it called again?
It's by Steve Portugal, interviewing users, and it probably has a subtitle that I forget.
His Twitter's worth following as well. He's regular.
It's a great
he's got a
book.
good. He's a good Twitter.
Yeah, that's a great book, Chauncey. Very good recommendation.
Yeah. And he also has a podcast.
So much.
There it is.
Yeah.
David's showing it. That's what it looks like. David's just got it on the screen there.
Very cool.
Not sure if you guys heard. He also has a podcast where he interviews interviewers and researchers.
Yeah, Dollars to Donuts is his podcast.
He also
to donuts. Okay.
That's the book. No, that's
Alia has it too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Steve also wrote a book about sort of the scary stories about user research. So I wrote one about, doing research at a spy agency, and they'd forgotten to send all the security info, and suddenly I was surrounded by armed men, So yeah, he had lots of good stories about doing research in the field.
Yeah, it's something doorknobs and
oh
yeah, the name escapes me. I can see who's going to hold it up. I know Lori has it because I bought it for her.
Doorbells, danger, and dead batteries.
There it is. Yeah.
There's a recurring theme here with these titles.
Right. She likes the D's. Yes, exactly. Anybody else have any good books? Yes, Just Enough Research by Erica Hall. Yes,
That's an awesome book. They can give that to product managers to read.
Yeah, she's just released another issue. And yeah, what a great book, for sure.
Speaking of Erica Hall, I've been reading conversational design, I think. That one's really, I found that one's one of my favorite ones by her. Really, really good one.
I don't know if anyone here, I'm a semi-regular at their quarantine book club, which happens 3 or 4 evenings a week, where they interview just like a hit parade of remarkable people week after week since late March. And it's just endlessly fascinating, hilarious, touching, all of these things that feed your soul, and I would recommend it to anybody. I would say
I'm always a fan of interesting conversations, especially the weirder than wonderful. Always I can assume that.
Yeah.
What is the it you're talking about?
Sorry?
What is the it you're talking about?
It's so Erica Hall and Mike Montero co-host. If you go to quarantinebookclub.com.
Okay.
They're on Eventbrite too.
Yeah, you register through Eventbrite.
I spelled it wrong in the chat, but
sorry. Yeah.
We got you, Marga. We get where you're going.
Another book that I found that's really
there it is.
been helpful if you have a little more research experience, so proving it to stakeholders. Anything by Jeff Sarro, but I particularly like Quantifying the User Experience. So it's practical statistics for user research, and this is for someone who doesn't know stats. He's just like, here's what you should get out of these particular analyses.
What is the name? Can you repeat the name again? It's Quantifying the User Experience.
Quantifying the User Experience, Practical Statistics for User Research by Jeff Sarro.
Thank
We need to get that in the chat. That's
Thank
long.
you.
Yeah. Jeff Sarro's a leader, and he has a good blog about usability topics and how to look at data properly. So yes, he's specialized in statistics for usability.
Yeah, his website's great. Like he goes in depth with stuff around sus, and we actually have put into practice the UX Lite here at GitLab as part of our category maturity scorecard process, because it simplifies the sus and the NPS together, and I found it on his website. It's perfect. So yeah, I highly recommend Jeff's website and all of his books.
Very cool.
Cool.
Another resource that I'm fairly new to a lot of this research, but so a lot of this is eye-opening, but I guess this was particularly interesting. Jared Spool's Leaders of Awesomeness community. I saw the link earlier, and one of the things that he did was a week-long session on UX strategy and research, and one of the topics we just brought up is how do you measure the effectiveness of what we do, and how do you convince other people to pay attention? And that was very enlightening, sort of what he had to share about a framework for teaching teams to do that, to set research and then show that you're actually contributing to the company's bottom line with the research you're doing. So I'd encourage people who are interested.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so what was the bottom line of how to demonstrate the usefulness?
Yeah, I mean, essentially he kind of goes off to begin with, talking about it is good business to do research because, without it, there's certain kinds of research, there's no real ways to understand the needs of the customer, right? And without that, how do you produce something of value? And if you don't do that, your competitors will. So he makes a very compelling kind of argument for the framework he lays out. So anyways, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I can agree more. And also, I had the UX outcomes actually was persuasive metrics on leaders of awesomeness, and he was even given us homework to do, and was really good from UX outcomes to how to select your metrics and how to pull up your research in order to feed these metrics. It was really, really good. Really, really good. I'm not sure if it's everything for free. I got just one for free. Not sure if you have to pay after.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He
Well, I want to. I would love to have this conversation going all night, but I'm hungry, so I'm going to call it. I'm just cutting it off for selfish reasons. I know.
I like how she's like, oh, she's hungry. It's 1 a.m. here.
I know, right? And you must be tired. So I'm
I know.
Tyler. Actually, Tyler's he messaged me on the side.
Tyler.
He
It's
said
all
he's
about the
ready to
leader.
go. We're all leaders here. So a couple of things. Go to Eventbrite. Sign up for Deb Gelman's event in August. It's going to be really cool. Remote ethnographic research. We're also hosting World Usability Day in November. Tickets are available for that. And please fill out the survey, post-event survey. Give us your feedback. Let us know what your thoughts, how we can improve. Especially let us know what you thought of the breakout rooms. Do you want to continue activities like that or not? But I think we're going to call it an evening. Thank you so much for everybody for coming and participating and hanging out this long. And hopefully we'll see you in August. How about that?
Okay.
Have a good night. Thanks,
was
everybody.
great. Thank you.
Bye.
Good to meet everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Have a good night.